Move out of the way, girl. Don't let that dirt get on this premium office carpet. Your job is to keep this floor clean. Not stand there staring at other people's documents with that empty head of yours. Do you understand where your place is?
The routing code doesn't match, Mr. Vale. The algorithm that split $360 million into pieces under 10,000 to avoid FinCEN's BSA filter left its only physical trace on this printer.
You're insane! Uneducated nonsense! Security, come in. 61st floor security, get into the CEO's office right now. We have an illegal intruder from CleanTech trying to steal confidential documents. Let her go. Let her continue. If Deloitte's chief auditor, with a $500,000 salary a year, cannot explain why our corporation's Fedwire routing code has a manual X character, then I want to hear the answer from my cleaner. Adrian, you stand right there.
Mr. Blackwood, Deloitte's automated audit system cannot read these cut paper strips. But 7 years ago, before I had to drop out because of my family burden, I completed forensic accounting with top marks. You have 4 hours before sunrise and your entire empire disappears from this country forever. Do you trust your Ivy League strategist or do you trust this torn notebook of mine?
The only sound inside the huge CEO office at 11 o'clock at night was the faint mechanical hum from the central air filtration system. The Blackwood Global Tower stood tall in the heart of Manhattan. Almost every light in the building had been turned off except for the 61st floor, where a cold strip of dim blue light still glowed through the polarized glass. Julian Blackwood sat motionless in the expensive leather chair behind his solid walnut desk. The top button of the 42-year-old billionaire's white shirt had been undone. His Hermes silk tie had been pulled loose and thrown carelessly on the desk beside a glass of Westland whiskey that had been empty for a long time. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, fixed on 3 large Bloomberg screens flashing nonstop. In the center of the main screen, the strategic cash flow management interface displayed a line of bright red capital letters, like a bleeding wound across the digital charts. Transmission alerts, reconciliation failure, deficit 3C Moon, $360 million. The corporation's entire emergency liquidity fund, the money prepared to secure a historic merger with a Singapore investment fund the following week, had completely vanished from the custodian banking system in less than 6 hours. The wire transfers had been carried out using Julian's own highest-level digital security key through an encrypted electronic signature that only he and one other person in the company possessed. Deloitte's automated security system had not issued a single warning while the money was moving. The alert came only when the receiving side reported that the holding account was still empty. Julian brought both hands to his head, his rough fingers digging deep into his slicked-back hair, now messy from hours of stress. A suffocating feeling crashed down on him, pressing hard against the chest of a man known on Wall Street as an unbeatable wolf. He had spent the whole evening calling legal advisors, top cybersecurity experts, and bank directors in New York, but all he received were helpless headshakes or automated responses from technical support systems. The cash flow had been peeled apart, broken into pieces, and vanished into a digital maze without leaving any physical trace. In the absolute emptiness of the room, more than 1,000 square feet wide, Julian Blackwood slowly lowered his head onto the desk. The broad shoulders of the billionaire shook in short, violent waves. Hot, bitter tears began falling onto the polished walnut surface, blurring the reflected light from the computer screens. These were not tears for the massive amount of money. They were tears of total helplessness from a giant who had realized he had been betrayed from the inside by the most trusted person he had once considered a brother during 15 years of building his empire. The betrayal was so clean and perfect that it gave him no chance to explain anything to the board. Just as despair was choking the office, the automatic glass door slid open with a soft but firm sound. Nia Carter pushed a 3-tier plastic CleanTech cart across the threshold. The 28-year-old black woman wore a loose gray-blue cleaning uniform. Her natural curly hair was tied neatly with a rough gray cloth headband. Her old sneakers moved silently across the New Zealand wool carpet, not making even the smallest sound. Nia did not look around. Her deep brown eyes stayed fixed on the yellow plastic bucket and spin mop placed on the bottom level of the cart. According to the night cleaning schedule, Nia had to be on the 61st floor every night at 11 to clean all executive offices before the next business day began. This job paid her $18 an hour, just enough to cover the rent on an old, damp duplex apartment in Jamaica, Queens, and more importantly, to buy special medication for her elderly mother, who was bedridden with late-stage kidney failure. Every month, the red overdue hospital bills sent from the pub hospital haunted her constantly, forcing Nia to take extra shifts from 2 in the morning to 6 in the morning at nearby buildings. Nia stopped the cart in the corner of the room, about 16 feet from Julian's desk. She pulled the yellow rubber gloves from her belt, slipped them over her thin hands, and began wiping dust from the leather-bound bookshelves behind him with a microfiber cloth. She had worked in this tower for 18 months, and during that time, Nia had learned the unwritten survival rule of Manhattan night cleaners. A cleaner is not allowed to have a face. To office employees in suits, stockbrokers, and executives busy with million-dollar deals, the women in gray-blue uniforms who cleaned every night were invisible ghosts. They passed by Nia as if she were air. They threw paper cups filled with coffee grounds in front of her without once looking her in the eye, and they discussed billion-dollar confidential matters on the phone while she bent down to clean stains beneath their feet. Nia accepted that invisibility. She knew her place inside the American social structure. She understood that a greeting at the wrong time or a curious glance could immediately get her contract canceled and destroy the only income keeping her mother alive. As she moved the mop closer to the desk, she saw Julian Blackwood collapsed over the table. She heard his heavy breathing and noticed the shining wet marks on the walnut surface under the red glow of the Bloomberg screen. Nia stopped for 1/10 of a second. The sharp observation instinct of a woman who had once spent years in college classrooms rose inside her, pushing her to look at the computer screen and read the error warning. She recognized the phrase reconciliation filcher and the number 360 million USD. However, the limited belief built from 10 years of poverty and social rejection immediately pulled her back to reality. "You're just a janitor cleaning trash, Nia," she told herself silently, her hands gripping the cold aluminum mop handle. "They have Wall Street audit systems. They have million-dollar lawyers. Even if you speak, who would believe a black woman cleaning floors at night? Your job is to mop this floor and get out before the night guard makes his round." She lowered her eyes and continued pushing the mop in straight, even lines, keeping the proper distance of an invisible person inside a billionaire's office. At that moment, the iPhone on Julian's desk suddenly rang. The default ringtone sounded harsh, cutting through the thick silence of the room. Julian Blackwood jerked upright. He quickly wiped his face with his hand, trying to swallow his choking emotion and regain his usual hard voice. He looked at the caller ID, Marcus Vance, board member. He accepted the call, turned on speaker, and placed the phone on the glass surface with a shaking hand. "Julian here, Marcus," Julian said, his voice hoarse but trying to keep his breathing steady. "Julian, I just received the internal report from Deloitte's audit office." Marcus Vance's voice came through the speaker, cold, sharp, and completely without the warmth of friendship, even though the two men had once studied together at Columbia. "The system shows that the guarantee account for the Singapore deal was completely empty at 10 p.m. tonight. $360 million disappeared. How do you explain this?" "We're checking the custodian system again, Marcus." Julian pressed both hands against the edge of the desk and leaned toward the phone as if begging for patience. "Adrian Vale is in the senior accounting room breaking down the data packets. This could be a sophisticated encrypted phishing attack from an organized hacker group in Europe. My security key may have been manipulated from outside. Don't talk to me with PR language, Julian." Marcus Vance cut him off sharply through the phone. "We don't care about hackers or system incidents. The board only cares about facts. Your personal digital key was the only thing used to approve 36,000 continuous wire transfers this afternoon. Our lawyers have already prepared the legal documents. If by exactly 8 tomorrow morning, when the stock market opens, that $360 million is not explained and returned to the guarantee account, the board will hold an emergency meeting." Julian closed his eyes tightly, his knuckles turning white under the LED light. "Marcus, give me 24 hours. I swear." "You don't have another minute, Julian," Marcus Vance said in a final tone, carrying the terrible pressure of an American corporate system ready to crush anyone who threatened its stock price. "At exactly 8 tomorrow morning, you either present a legal cash flow reconciliation report, or you sign your resignation and hand over full control of the corporation to Adrian Vale so we can begin a federal criminal investigation. Don't make us use security to remove you from the Blackwood Global building. Sleep well, Julian." The long beep sounded from the phone. The call ended, leaving Julian Blackwood sitting motionless in complete deadlock. He knew Marcus was not exaggerating. In the world of Wall Street power players, betrayal always came with the most brutal speed. If control fell into Adrian Vale's hands in the morning, the empire Julian had built over 15 years would be erased, and he himself would face federal prison for criminal negligence with serious consequences. Nia Carter stood in the corner of the room. Her ears had taken in the entire conversation through the speakerphone. Her eyes focused on the phone after the screen went dark, then moved to Julian's back as he collapsed forward for the second time. Her mind began working at dizzying speed. 7 years earlier, before her mother's medical bills forced her to leave college and her outstanding bachelor's degree behind, Nia had spent all her time studying sophisticated financial fraud methods used by major energy corporations. She understood one thing very clearly. An outside cyber attack could never automatically split $360 million into 36,000 small transactions under $10,000 so smoothly without triggering the Bank Secrecy Act filter, unless the person behind it had manual access to the CFO's own internal print formatting system. Naya slowly pushed the clean tech cart out of the CEO's office. She pulled the glass door closed behind her, leaving Julian Blackwood alone in the darkness of despair. According to the cleaning schedule, Nia moved the cart down the gray carpeted hallway toward the far end of the 61st floor, where the large office of Chief Financial Officer Adrian Vale was located. Adrian Vale's office was empty now, and the CFO's leather chair had been pushed close to the corner of the reinforced glass conference table. The room was perfectly neat, exactly reflecting the personality of a man who graduated top of his class at Wharton and controlled every detail of his life and work absolutely. On a pressed wood side table beside the window, the old Xerox Altalink 8170 industrial printer still gave off faint heat and the familiar smell of ink after running heavily all day. Naya pulled a black trash bag from the drawer of her cart and walked toward the stainless steel trash bin under Adrian's desk. She bent down and lifted the trash bin to dump the shredded paper into the black bag. But as the first scraps began to slide out, the data pattern recognition instinct of a former forensic accounting student stopped her hand halfway. Sitting right on top of the trash pile was an A4 sheet that had been cut halfway by the industrial shredder, but because of some mechanical paper jam, the lower half of the page remained intact. It was a failed printout from the corporation's internal accounting system. Nia set the trash bin down on the carpet, removed her rubber gloves, and carefully picked up the failed printout under the fluorescent light of the hallway. On the paper, coded number lines from the Fedwire direct payment gateway were arranged neatly in columns. Nia's sharp eyes moved quickly across the bank routing format lines. She read the first character representing the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, followed by the branch number. However, when her eyes stopped at the final line showing a manual federal routing code, the code used to verify false special pending transactions, a major logical gap appeared before her. The routing code printed on the failed page was 021000021X. To an ordinary person or even a normal Deloitte auditor, that character string would look completely valid because it matched the system format of Blackwood Global's custodian bank. But from the advanced forensic research materials she had studied 7 years earlier, Nia knew that the X character at the end of the line appeared only when a transaction was manually routed through a temporary holding account under personal ownership, not an international corporate guarantee account. This routing code did not match the system code for the Singapore deal. It was a fake transfer order perfectly disguised through a print formatting error to trick Deloitte's AI filter. Nia Carter stood motionless in Adrian Vale's empty office, the failed printout trembling slightly between her thin fingers. She realized she was not just holding a piece of trash. She was holding the only key that could break the $360 million financial maze of the Ivy League CFO, save Julian Blackwood's empire, and completely reverse her own fate before dawn rose over New York City. The shorthand of the Jaeger-LeCoultre clock on the suede-covered wall of the CEO office moved slowly toward 1. The space had grown thicker and heavier after Marcus Vance's ultimatum-filled call. Julian Blackwood still sat in the same place, hands clasped under his chin, eyes staring into empty space on the desk. The dried Westland whiskey foam clinging to the glass had left gray streaks. It's no different from the dark future, waiting for the giant of Blackwood Global at 8 tomorrow morning. The automatic glass door slid open again, bringing in a sharp rush of cold air from the central hallway. Adrian Vale stepped in. The 45-year-old chief financial officer showed no sign of fatigue from a night of disaster. His salt and pepper hair was neatly gelled, not one strand out of place. His charcoal gray Savile Row suit was perfectly smooth across his solid shoulders. In Adrian's hand was an iPad Pro and a navy blue leather folder stamped with the corporation's gold-plated logo. He walked with a calm, confident rhythm, the soles of his Oxford shoes pressing into the New Zealand wool carpet with dull, even sounds like a programmed countdown clock. "Julian," Adrian said, his voice warm and filled with carefully calculated concern like a seasoned politician. He set the folder on the desk, pulled out the leather chair across from Julian, sat down, and leaned forward to show maximum sympathy. "I just finished checking all banking network data gates with the senior security engineers from the London office. The situation is much more complicated than we thought." Julian raised his eyes, his voice hoarse and exhausted. "Have you found any trace of the money, Adrian? Did the federal side or FinCEN respond?" Adrian gave a very soft sigh, slid his finger across the tablet screen, and pushed it toward Julian. "This is the system encryption report we just extracted from the Federal Reserve's Fedwire payment gateway. All 36,000 transfers this afternoon were carried out through an automated protocol using the end-to-end security code structure tied to your personal ownership. This ecosystem is built too cleanly. The internal transaction confirmation emails, compliance terms, and your encrypted digital signature all match perfectly on the legal surface. Julian pulled the tablet closer, his dark circled eyes moving across the complicated rows of digital data. On the screen, cash flow reconciliation tables displayed a network of intermediary accounts stretching from agent banks in Frankfurt to trust funds in Zurich. That's impossible, Adrian. I never opened these fund categories. My security key is always stored in the hardware device inside the safe in this office. I know, Julian, I believe you. Adrian lowered his voice, shifting into the tone of a loyal brother trying to protect his friend from the edge of a grave. He opened the leather folder and pointed to a system log printed in red ink. But Deloitte's storage system does not lie. Look here. 3 weeks ago, during the global cloud security upgrade, you approved an addendum for automated access rights for strategic partners in Europe. This code allows the system to automatically break payments under $10,000 apart to optimize tax rates. The person behind this attack did not steal your money in a crude way. He used that exact clause, planted a sophisticated encrypted fraud algorithm, and turned the withdrawals into perfectly legal transactions. Julian stared at his own digital signature displayed at the bottom of the compliance file. His mind buzzed, and a feeling of extreme confusion began invading his thoughts. The financial maze Adrian presented was too tight, too logical in terms of corporate law and advanced programming. It made even a self-made financial genius like Julian begin to doubt his own memory. Had he, in one overloaded moment during his packed schedule 3 weeks ago, accidentally signed a destructive agreement without reading the hidden terms carefully? Had his own overconfidence opened the door for Wall Street predators to gut his empire? Does the board know? Julian asked, his voice now completely stripped of its usual sharpness, leaving only helpless surrender. Marcus Vance called me before he called you, Adrian said, pulling back the tablet and closing the leather folder with a neat snap. They're panicking, Julian. The Singapore investors have hinted they may withdraw if there is any management instability. The removal report and criminal investigation documents are already drafted. If you appear before the board tomorrow morning with a hacker theory and no physical proof, they will immediately push you into the hands of federal agents to calm the market. Adrian stood, walked toward the glass window, looked down at the bright lights of Manhattan, then turned back to Julian with a look full of fake regret. The only way to save Blackwood Global right now is for you to temporarily step back. Sign the executive authorization document transferring control to me before 6 in the morning. I'll use my own name and political relationships in Washington to negotiate with the SECs and request a 48-hour delay on the audit. I'll take the pressure from the board for you. That is the only solution, Julian. Adrian Vale's offer sounded like the only life raft in a violent river, but in truth it was the killing blow wrapped in the velvet of kindness. Julian Blackwood did not know that behind that worried face was a plan calculated down to the second to take all power from him and turn him into a foolish criminal inside the empire he had built with blood. Outside the executive hallway, the space was completely separate from the suffocating atmosphere inside the CEO's office. Soft LED lights reflected across white oak-paneled walls and expensive contemporary art. Nia Carter was bent over, using a microfiber cloth soaked in special alcohol solution to clean the polarized glass wall separating the central office. Her yellow plastic bucket sat beside her, filled with floor cleaner that smelled strongly of pine. The cheap smell that always clung to her skin after every 12-hour night shift and reminded her of her low position in this tower. Although Nia's hands still moved in steady circles across the glass, her full attention was fixed on the reflection of the meeting room in the shiny surface. Through the narrow gap of the CEO office door, which had been left slightly open, Nia could clearly hear every warm but sharp word from Adrian Vale, and she could see the blinking financial charts on the iPad the CFO carried out of the room. When Adrian Vale stepped out of Julian's office and headed toward the elevator, he held the navy leather folder and flipped through it, his fingers moving quickly over printed pages of the company's public cash flow data to prepare for the dawn board meeting. He passed Nia without slowing down, treating her like part of the building's interior design. It was during those few short seconds when the CFO walked past that Nia's sharp brown eyes and extraordinary memory as a former top forensic accounting student activated naturally. From less than 3 feet away, Nia saw the columns of numbers displayed on the open page in Adrian's hands. It was a list of the 36,000 outgoing transfers from that afternoon, all ranging from $9,500 to $9,950. A current ran down Nia's spine. Her mind instantly broke apart and reconnected the data fragments at terrifying speed without needing any Wall Street software. 7 years earlier, in community college classrooms, Nines had sleepless nights solving case studies about major economic crimes in America. She knew this structure very well. This was not a cloud system error. It was not a cyber phishing attack from Europe as Adrian had deliberately explained to manipulate Julian. This was a classic financial fraud method called structuring. $360 million had not disappeared through one large transfer. It had been split into tens of thousands of transactions under $10,000 for one purpose: to avoid the automatic filters of the Bank Secrecy Act and the anti-money laundering warning system of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network under the U.S. Treasury. Deloitte's system had not raised an alert because each separate transaction stayed below the legal monitoring threshold, creating a quiet underground current that drained the corporation's lifeblood without anyone noticing. Adrian Vale's financial maze was perfect enough to fool the entire team of senior audit experts because they were searching for a major security breach or a massive illegal transfer. They never considered that a Wharton-educated CFO would use such a basic but sophisticated method to pull money out right under their noses. Adrian had built a system that looked too clean on the surface, using the arrogance of the management class to hide a huge financial crime. Nia Carter stood frozen in place, the microfiber cloth in her hand stopped halfway across the polarized glass. Her chest rose and fell with heavy breaths as she realized the terrible scale of the truth. That elegant CFO was the predator preparing to swallow the honest billionaire inside the empty room. She was the only person in this entire 61-story tower who could see the true structure of the collapsing house. At that moment, Adrian Vale stopped right in front of the executive elevator. He turned back as if he had noticed the unusual silence of the cleaner behind him. His cold ash-gray eyes moved across Nia's loose gray-blue uniform, then dropped to the mop rag lying on the expensive wool carpet. Adrian walked back, his polished Oxford shoe deliberately stepping straight onto the edge of Nia's mop rag soaked with pine cleaner. He looked her up and down, his face without emotion, but the deep-class arrogance and prejudice of a Wall Street power holder showed clearly in every line around his eyes. "Move out of the way, girl," Adrian said coldly, his voice low but wrapped in insulting sweetness that seemed to freeze the hallway air. "Don't let that dirt get on this premium office carpet. Your job is to keep this floor clean, not stand there staring at other people's documents with that empty head of yours. Do you understand where your place is?" Nia Carter lowered her head slightly, her hands, hidden inside the rubber gloves, clenched so hard that her nails dug into her palms. The leather edge of Adrian's shoe was crushing her mop rag, a small physical act that revealed the full cruelty of a social system that treated manual workers like voiceless beings. The pride of a girl who had once been at the top of her forensic accounting class was deeply wounded. A slow fire of anger began to burn inside her. She said nothing, did not fight back, and quietly stepped back one pace, giving the wide path to the arrogant, powerful man entering the elevator. The stainless steel doors closed, cutting off Adrian Vale's contemptuous stare. 2:15 in the morning, Nia Carter pushed the clean-tech cart back to the cleaning staff break room at the end of the basement hallway. The room was less than 100 square feet, thick with the smell of bleach, damp clothes, and the constant hum of the old refrigerator in the corner. This was the only space in the skyscraper where people like Nia could remove the mask of invisibility and take one long breath. Nia sat down on the only blue plastic chair in the room. She pulled off the yellow rubber gloves and threw them hard into the stainless steel sink, revealing thin hands with long, slender fingers that had once spent thousands of hours typing on computer keyboards. Her whole body was exhausted after a long shift, but her mind was strangely clear. The numbers, routing codes, and Adrian Vale's insult kept circling through her thoughts like a storm. She reached for the worn rough cloth handbag on the metal locker shelf. From the bottom of the bag, Nia carefully pulled out an old blue leather notebook, faded and torn at the corners, held together with strips of clear tape. It was the only treasure she had left from her college years, a notebook filled with every cash flow tracing formula, Fedwire code format, and financial structure analysis log that she had written by hand in black and red ink. Nia opened the first blank page of the notebook and placed it on the old pressed wood table under the flickering fluorescent light of the break room. Then she carefully took from her uniform pocket the half-cut Xerox A4 failed printout she had picked up earlier from Adrian Vale's office trash bin. She placed the failed printout beside the blue leather notebook. Nia took a $2 ballpoint pen from her purse and began writing down the number sequence she had seen on Adrian's document earlier, lining it up with the columns already on the page. Under the dim fluorescent light, Nia's eyes shone with the steady, sharp light of a true forensic accountant. She began making manual reconciliation calculations between Blackwood Global's outgoing cash flow and the federal routing code 210000021X printed on the Xerox scrap. Black ink lines began drawing arrows connecting intermediary accounts in Germany and Switzerland, peeling away the mask of the cloud fraud algorithm Adrian had built to manipulate Julian. After more than 40 minutes of nonstop analysis, the pen in Nia's hand suddenly stopped at one final character string. Her lips pressed together, and her breath caught in her throat when she discovered the core logical flaw of the entire massive fraud. Adrian Vale had been too confident in elite-class arrogance and the invisibility of cleaning workers. He believed no one on the 61st floor, from Deloitte's audit experts to Julian Blackwood himself, had eyes sharp enough to recognize the mismatch in the manual print formatting string of the Fedwire system. But he was wrong. The routing code 021000021X on the failed printout did not connect to any guarantee account belonging to the Singapore partner or any holding account of European hackers. The X character at the end of the code was the verification order for a special secure account registered as a single-member limited liability company in Delaware, a state famous for some of the strictest owner identity privacy laws in America. However, Adrian's algorithm for breaking the money into pieces under $10,000 had accidentally left its only physical trace on the old Xerox printer. The tax registration number of the shell company Avalon Holdings matched exactly with the personal identifier Adrian had once used to escrow private real estate in New York 10 years earlier. The core of the $360 million fraud had been fully exposed on the surface of the old pressed wood table in the cleaning staff break room. There was no cyber attack from Europe. The entire amount was sitting quietly inside a personal guarantee account controlled by Adrian Vale himself in Delaware, waiting for Julian Blackwood to sign the resignation document in the morning and officially complete the takeover of Blackwood Global. Nia Carter stared at the handwritten cash flow reconciliation table in her blue leather notebook. The truth was completely clear, but with it came a terrible moral pressure weighing on her thin shoulders. Nia knew there were less than 4 hours left before the board's ultimatum deadline. She was holding the fate of a billionaire and the future of one of Manhattan's largest financial corporations in her hands. If she chose silence and continued playing the role of an invisible ghost cleaning other people's wreckage for $18 an hour, Adrian Vale would win, Julian Blackwood would be ruined and go to prison, and her poor life with her mother would continue in quiet misery in Queens. But if she chose to stand straight and step out of the darkness with this notebook to confront the powerful CFO, she would face the immediate risk of losing her job, being accused of blackmail, or illegally accessing confidential corporate documents. Would American society out there ever believe a black woman in a cleaning uniform when she dared expose a financial genius from Wharton? Nia Carter slowly closed the blue leather notebook. The dry sound of the covers touching echoed through the empty break room. The fluorescent light above her suddenly flickered once and went out, pushing the room into uncertain darkness, just like the impossible choice waiting for her before dawn rose over the towers of Manhattan. The wall clock moved slowly toward 2:30 in the morning. Streetlights from surrounding skyscrapers shone through the polarized glass, creating long pale streaks across the polished marble floor of the CEO's office. Julian Blackwood stood tall by the floor-to-ceiling window, both hands deep in the pockets of his dress pants. The 42-year-old billionaire's back stood against the night sky of Manhattan, looking lonelier and more broken than ever. On the walnut desk, the executive authorization papers drafted by Adrian Vale lay open beside an uncapped gold Mont Blanc fountain pen. With one signature from Julian, full control of Blackwood Global would officially pass to the CFO. It was a document admitting management failure, an unconditional surrender under pressure from the board in exchange for the so-called political protection Adrian had promised. From the corner of the room, the small wheels of the clean-tech cart squeaked softly as Nia Carter pushed it across the glass threshold. She carried a yellow plastic bucket filled with pine-smelling floor cleaner and a spin mop for the final cleaning round of her shift. Nia's brown eyes moved over the documents on the desk, then dropped to Julian's shoulders, which were trembling slightly from tension. During her 18 months working there, Nia had watched Julian Blackwood run the corporation with a rare kind of integrity in the Wall Street financial market. He was the only person who had ever nodded hello to her when they happened to share the service elevator, the only person who did not treat a black cleaner like an invisible thing. Seeing the scheduled collapse of this honest giant, Nia's long-held limited belief that the voice of someone at the bottom would never be heard began to shake violently. She knew that if she silently walked out of this door, the darkness of injustice would bury the truth forever. Nia stopped the mop in the middle of the room. Water dripped from the rag onto the New Zealand wool carpet, making soft ticking sounds that broke the room's still silence. She took a deep breath, feeling the cold air conditioning run down her spine, then slowly walked closer to the walnut desk. She placed her worn blue leather notebook beside the Mont Blanc pen and looked directly at the billionaire's back. The routing code doesn't match. Nia's rang out, steady, clear, and not shaking at all. Julian Blackwood turned around in shock. His bloodshot eyes widened with surprise as he looked at the black woman in the loose cleaning uniform standing before his desk. He frowned, looked at the battered notebook beside the authorization document, then looked back at Nia as if trying to decide whether he had misheard because of exhaustion. "What did you just say?" Julian asked hoarsely, taking one step closer to the desk. Before Nia could answer, the CEO office door slid open again. Adrian Vale walked in with a glass of ice water in his hand. The elegant smile of the CFO vanished the moment he saw the night cleaner standing close to the confidential desk. His eyebrows jerked and his ash-gray eyes showed extreme anger and contempt. "Carter?" "What the hell are you doing here?" Adrian shouted, his usual politeness gone, his voice sharp. He slammed the glass onto the desk and immediately pulled the walkie-talkie phone from his belt. 61st floor security. Get into the CEO's office right now. We have an illegal intruder from Cleantech trying to access confidential documents. Adrian moved forward, trying to knock Nia's notebook off the desk, but Nia was faster. She pressed her thin hand firmly over the notebook, her calm brown eyes facing the public judgment barrel of the CFO. "I am not an illegal intruder, Mr. Vale," Nia said in a lower voice, but every word was as firm as numbers on a financial report. "I am doing my cleaning job. And the dirtiest thing on this floor is the fraud algorithm that split $360 million, the one you just blamed on European hackers. You're insane." Uneducated nonsense. Adrian stepped closer, tapping 2 fingers wrapped in expensive cuff sleeves hard against Nia's plastic bucket, releasing class insults to crush her resistance. "Julian, look at this. This is what happens when you are too kind to people from the bottom. A night cleaner without even a proper college degree is using trash paper from a shredder to invent a crazy story right before an SEC audit, hoping to blackmail the corporation. You're tired. Don't let an unqualified person manipulate your honor." 2 large night security guards immediately pushed the door open, hands resting near the handgun holsters on their hips. One of them moved forward and grabbed Nia's arm, preparing to drag her back. "Let her go." Julian Blackwood's low but powerful voice rang out, freezing the motion of the 2 guards. The billionaire did not look at Adrian. He bent down and carefully looked at the first open page of the blue leather notebook. On it were handwritten lines in black and red ink, drawing a highly complex cash flow map with a clear legal structure. "Julian, are you insane?" Adrian looked openly worried, his voice rising. "You're going to listen to a cleaner explain international finance?" Nia did not look at Adrian. She looked straight into Julian Blackwood's eyes, her posture giving off a professional pressure that forced the CFO to step back half a pace. "Mr. Blackwood, Deloitte's automated audit system cannot read the failed paper strips from the Xerox printer Mr. Vale threw away. But 10 years ago, before my mother's medical bills forced me to leave college, I was the top student in forensic accounting at Queens Community College. I know how cash flow moves when it wants to run." Nia turned to the next page of the notebook and pointed to a formatted character string. "Your $360 million did not leave the United States through a cyber attack. It is being split into 36,000 payments under $10,000 to avoid FinCEN's BSA filter, and the manual routing code 021000021X, printed on Mr. Vale's old printer, is the activation command for the direct Fedwire payment gateway of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York." Nia explained the structure of the money-splitting order smoothly and clearly, without looking at any computer screen. Her lips were pressed tight, and forensic finance terms poured from the mouth of a girl in a cleaning uniform like a powerful indictment. Julian Blackwood stood stunned. As a self-made financial genius, he immediately recognized the terrible status gap being erased. The black woman the entire corporation had walked past like air for 18 months, the woman holding a mop for $18 an hour, had a genius mind capable of breaking down a major Wall Street financial crime with one glance at a piece of trash paper. Adrian Vale's face turned gray. The Ivy League CFO stepped forward and tried to snatch the notebook, his voice breaking with fear. "Seize her cloth bag. These are stolen confidential corporate documents." Julian Blackwood reached out and stopped Adrian's arm in midair. The billionaire's eyes shifted, cold and sharp as a dagger aimed straight into the loyal CFO's ash-gray eyes. "Let her continue," he said, each word slow but heavy as 1,000 pounds. He turned to the 2 security guards and signaled them to step back to the door. "If Deloitte's chief auditor with a $500,000 salary a year cannot explain why our corporation's Fedwire routing code has a manual X character, then I want to hear the answer from my cleaner. Adrian, you stand right there." The first sunlight of the new day slipped through gray clouds above the East River, casting cold orange streaks into Blackwood Global's boardroom. At 5:30 in the morning, the huge glass-walled room on the 61st floor, usually silent at that hour, was now filled with suffocating tension. All 12 members of the board, led by Marcus Vance, sat around the oval conference table made of bulletproof composite material. Beside them were corporate lawyers in polished black pinstripe suits, constantly flipping through thick legal files. The clicking of fountain pens and the rustling of papers created a rushed, messy sound that pushed everyone's heartbeat to the highest level. The sudden emergency summons from Julian Blackwood before dawn had forced them out of their soft Upper East Side beds to face a $360 million crisis. Adrian Vale sat at the corner of the table across from Julian, one hand tapping lightly on his iPad Pro, the other lifting a glass of ice water for a small sip. The confidence of a Wharton valedictorian CFO showed in every calm movement. His wrinkle-free suit and the arrogant little smile on his lips carried a silent message to the shareholders that he had the game fully under control. To Adrian, Julian's weak resistance in the office 2 hours earlier was only the desperate struggle of a trapped animal. "Julian, I think we are wasting the board's valuable time, Adrian said, his voice warm and persuasive in the typical style of the financial elite. He stood, adjusted his white gold cufflink, and swept his eyes around the table. The New York Stock Exchange will open in a few hours. Instead of preparing a smooth transfer of authority to recover trust from the Singapore investors, you dragged everyone here to listen to baseless theories. Handwritten notes in a torn notebook from a night-cleaning employee have no legal or technical value before the SEC. We cannot run a multinational corporation on the paranoia of someone who takes out trash. Marcus Vance cleared his throat, looked at the Patek Philippe on his wrist, then turned to Julian with a stern expression. Julian, Adrian is right. We need legal evidence verified by independent audit firms, not a dawn circus. If you have nothing new to explain the $360 million deficit, I'm afraid we must proceed with the removal vote immediately. Julian Blackwood sat silently in the chairperson's seat, both hands clasped tightly on the table. His face had regained the frightening calm of a commander standing before a decisive battle. He did not look at Adrian. He only slowly raised his eyes and looked straight at Marcus Vance. Truth does not care about class, Marcus, Julian said, his voice low but echoing through the glass-walled room. He pressed the button on the remote in his hand. And the person you call someone who takes out trash is the only one who saw the black hole we stepped into. The oak door of the boardroom slowly opened. Nia Carter walked in. She was still wearing the loose gray-blue cleaning uniform of the clean-tech contractor, her sleeves rolled up to reveal thin but strong arms. Her old sneakers made no sound on the carpet, but her posture, the straight back of someone holding the truth, made every lawyer and shareholder in the room look up at once. Nia did not carry a mop or bucket. In her hands now were the worn blue leather notebook and the half-cut failed Xerox printout. A few whispers came from the white shareholders at the far end of the table. They looked at Nia with curiosity mixed with open contempt, as if she were some strange creature that had wandered into the temple of money power. Adrian Vale let out a soft snort through his nose, folded his arms across his chest, and watched Nia with the eyes of a hunter waiting for his prey to destroy itself. Nia walked straight to the head of the table, where the corporation's chief security systems engineer sat before the central control computer connected to the giant 4-meter LED screen on the wall. She placed the blue leather notebook on the glass table in front of everyone. "Good morning, members of the board," Nia said, her voice showing no hesitation, her English precise and sharp like that of a senior financial expert. "My name is Nia Carter, night cleaning staff for the 61st floor. I am not here to blackmail anyone or invent a wild story. I am here to show you where the corporation's $360 million actually is." She turned to the system engineer staring at her in confusion. "Please open the manual protocol authentication gate for the New York Fedwire system and access yesterday afternoon's pending order history." The engineer turned to Julian, searching for approval. Julian gave a small nod. The engineer's fingers immediately moved quickly across the keyboard, and the giant screen shifted to dark blue with thousands of complex security code lines. "Nia, my dear," Adrian Vale stepped forward, his voice filled with sugary superiority as he tried to interrupt her. "Deloitte's cloud security system scanned all of those command lines 5 times tonight. There was no trace of fraud. Those split numbers under $10,000 are legal tax compliance expenses for European branches. They are not European expenses, Mr. Vale." Nia cut him off firmly, her eyes drilling into his face and freezing the smile on Adrian's lips. She opened the handwritten page in her notebook and pointed at the character string printed on the failed Xerox sheet. "Enter the manual routing code 0210000021X into FinCEN Sayan's high-level security protocol filter." When Adrian Vale heard that number string, his pupils shrank for 1/10 of a second. The glass in his hand trembled slightly, making the ice inside click softly against the side. He tried to step forward to interfere, but Julian stood up at once, the billionaire's large shoulders blocking the CFO like a wall. "Enter the code," Julian ordered the system engineer. The keyboard clicked crisply in the absolute silence of the boardroom. When the enter key was pressed, the huge LED screen suddenly flashed 3 times. The Bank Secrecy Act's automated security spiral, which had been blinded by Adrian's algorithm breaking cash flow into pieces under $10,000, began to be brutally peeled backward under the precise direction of the manual routing code. The digital fog disappeared. On the giant screen, the entire network of 36,000 small transactions began automatically grouping itself into one single flow, like tiny grains of sand being pulled into a lens. That flow did not go to Frankfurt or Zurich the way Adrian had staged in the blue leather file. It moved backward through a small agent bank in Wilmington, Delaware. At the center of the screen, a line of yellow capital letters appeared clearly, striking the eyes of all 12 board members. Briefery account. Avalon Holdings, LLC, rendered in Delaware. Avalon Holdings? Marcus Vance shot to his feet, his face changing as he quickly flipped through internal files. That name is not on the strategic partner list for the Singapore deal. Whose company is this? Nia Carter stepped forward. At that moment, her posture carried the full authority of a forensic accountant delivering the final strike to a predator. She looked straight at Adrian Vale's face, which was slowly turning gray. Avalon Holdings LLC is a shell company registered with protected identity in Delaware exactly 3 weeks ago, matching the date of the corporation's cloud system upgrade. Nia said clearly, her voice ringing like a court judgment. And if the lawyers here use special access to check the social security number of the legal representative behind this trust, you will find the name Evelyn Vale, the biological mother of Chief Financial Officer Adrian Vale. An emotional explosion seemed to collapse the entire boardroom. What? Marcus Vance and the shareholders all turned toward Adrian Vale with shock, horror, and rising fury. The corporation's lawyers immediately lowered their heads to their laptops to verify the federal tax information, and their helpless confirming nods afterward officially nailed the CFO's crime in place. Adrian Vale's Ivy League arrogance collapsed in an instant. The glass in his hand slipped from his violently shaking fingers and fell onto the New Zealand wool carpet with a dull thud. Ice water spread out and soaked the tip of his expensive Oxford shoe, the same shoe that had arrogantly stepped on Nyada Carter's mop rag 12 hours earlier. Adrian's face turns gray, drained of blood. Large drops of sweat began forming on his forehead and running down to the collar of his Savile Row shirt, which now looked too tight, choking his breath. His lips moved again and again, but he could not produce a single reasonable explanation. The financial maze, so clean and perfect, which he had proudly built with his Wharton valedictorian mind, had been destroyed not by Deloitte's $1 million AI algorithm, but by an invisible black woman with a mop whom he had insulted as an empty head from the bottom. Deep satisfaction and victory filled the boardroom. Julian Blackwood looked straight at Adrian. His eyes no longer held the pain of a betrayed man, only supreme contempt for a fraud exposed behind his elite mask. The shareholders who had looked down on Nia now sat with their heads lowered in silence. Not one dared raise their eyes to look directly at the cleaning uniform shining brightly under the dawn light around her. At that exact moment, the 2 steel doors at the back of the boardroom were suddenly pushed open from the outside. 2 middle-aged men in dark navy overcoats stepped in with firm, direct steps. On their chests were bronze star badges of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Behind them came 2 fully armed uniformed agents. The lead agents walked straight toward Adrian Vale, pulled an ID card and a document stamped in red by the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York from his coat pocket and raised a pair of bright steel handcuffs in front of the CFO, who stood frozen like a wax statue. Adrian Vale, the FBI agent said, his cold and firm voice ringing out before the stun board. You are under arrest on charges of federal financial fraud, money laundering through the Fedwire system, and intentional theft of Blackwood Global corporate assets. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say from this moment can be used against you in court. Come with us. The 2 night security guards, the men who a few hours earlier had almost used force to throw Nia out, now quietly stepped aside, lowering their heads as the federal agents twisted Adrian Vale's arms behind his back and locked the cuffs with a crisp metallic click. The music of arrogant destiny ended in the cold sound of steel striking steel in the middle of the boardroom, just as bright dawn officially covered New York City in gold. When the federal patrol car carrying Adrian Vale disappeared beyond the basement security gate, the thick tension in the boardroom finally eased. The suffocating red numbers on the giant 4-meter LED screen had gone dark. In their place was an official security notice from the Federal Reserve's Fedwire system. The entire $360 million illegally moved to the Avalon Holdings shell company in Delaware had been fully frozen. The account freeze order was executed only 15 minutes before the SEC's regular audit began, saving Blackwood Global from a chain collapse on the Wall Street stock market. The 12 board members quietly left the meeting room, their steps no longer rushed and panicked as they had been a few hours earlier. Marcus Vance stopped by the glass window for a moment and gave Julian Blackwood a small nod with a look of respect and relief, then quickly walked toward the executive elevator. The huge glass-walled room suddenly felt wide and open under the morning sunlight. Julian Blackwood remained seated alone at the oval conference table. He twisted the cap back onto the gold Mont Blanc fountain pen, carefully placed it inside its velvet case, then looked up at Nia Carter. The 32-year-old black woman still stood in the same place, her thin hands clasped together on the bulletproof composite table. She looked out at the bright space beyond the window, where Manhattan skyscrapers reflected sunlight like giant blocks of crystal. Julian stood, gently pushed the leather chair aside, and took a personal J. Morgan Chase checkbook from the inner pocket of his suit. He placed it on the glass table, then used the velvet pen case to hold the paper down against the breeze from the air conditioning. Nia, Julian said, his voice no longer hoarse and exhausted from a sleepless night. It was filled with deep and sincere respect. I signed this already. The amount is $2 million from my personal investment account in Switzerland. It is completely legal and already tax cleared. This is not corporate sponsorship. This is Julian Blackwood's personal gratitude to the person who saved this empire from the hands of a traitor. You deserve far more, but I want you to have immediate financial security for yourself and your family. Nia Carter stared at the check printed with a long line of zeros. $2 million, an amount that could instantly change her whole life, move her and her elderly mother out of the leaking rental apartment in Queens, and make sure she never again had to smell sharp pine cleaner or wear torn yellow rubber gloves after 12-hour night shifts. But Nia did not reach for the paper. She smiled slightly, a gentle smile holding the firmness of someone who had tasted enough injustice to understand her own value. With one finger, she pushed the checkbook back toward Julian. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," Nia said, her voice soft but carrying a dignity that money could not buy. "But I cannot accept it. If I take this check and walk out of here, tonight's story will become nothing more than a successful negotiation between a billionaire and a lucky cleaner who found confidential documents. It would look like charity, like silent money paid, so I would disappear back into the darkness of Queens while you all keep running the world the old way. I do not want to spend the rest of my life feeling that my dignity was priced at $2 million. Julian Blackwood stared at her, stunned in a way even greater than when she had decoded the New York Fedwire routing code 2 hours earlier. "You're refusing it, Nia? You know this money could help you go back to school and give your mother the best medical care without worrying about overdue bills. Don't you?" "I know, Mr. Blackwood. But I want a more real reward, something that gives me back my true identity, instead of a bank account full of zeros." Nia stepped closer to the table, her eyes shining with the steady light of a financial genius. "I want Blackwood Global to sponsor all legal costs and procedures to restore my personal CPA license, the one that was suspended 10 years ago when I could not pay the renewal fees and professional insurance after leaving school. More importantly, I want you to establish an independent oversight division under the CEO's office." Nia opened her blue leather notebook and pointed to the blank pages at the back. "Your financial system has too many holes because you trust only expensive minds from Ivy League schools, people like Adrian Vale who know how to use elegance to hide greed. I want to run that oversight division with a salary worthy of my ability. And I want to personally recruit the first employees, poor students, the best minds from community colleges across America, people like me 10 years ago, brilliant minds who are delivering food, cleaning offices, or standing behind checkout counters because this system never gave them a path." Julian Blackwood looked at the woman in front of him, his chest rising with a wave of admiration. He understood that the black woman standing there did not need rescue money. She was demanding back the social position that had been stolen from her by a cold class structure. She was using her ability to build a bridge for thousands of invisible people outside to step into the light. "Done," Julian Blackwood said. He picked up the personal check and slowly tore it in half in front of Nia, then dropped it into the glass trash bin beside him. He extended his right hand toward her. "The agreement is established, Miss Carter. Blackwood Global's Independent Oversight Division will officially begin operations tomorrow under your full leadership. The corporation's legal office will complete the process to restore your CPA license before 5 p.m. today. Welcome back to the world of finance." Nia Carter reached out her thin hand and firmly shook the billionaire's hand. It was no longer a handshake between an owner and an employee. It was recognition between two great minds that had found common ground in protecting the integrity of life. 4:30 in the afternoon that same day. The golden summer sunset of New York stretched across the granite steps in front of the Blackwood Global Tower. The busy Wall Street crowd began pouring out from the skyscraper offices. Yellow taxi horns screamed at the street corners, and wind from New York Harbor brought in the salty taste of the ocean. The central revolving glass door of the building slid open in bright sunlight. Nia Carter stepped out. She was no longer wearing the loose gray-blue cleaning uniform or carrying the yellow plastic bucket. Nia wore an elegant navy blue suit tailored to fit her tall frame, with a clean cream-white silk blouse underneath. In her hand was not a microfiber cleaning cloth soaked in alcohol, but a professional leather briefcase holding confidential documents and the old blue leather notebook, the only treasure reminding her of the journey she had survived. Her natural curly hair was pinned neatly, revealing a sharp face and brown eyes filled with the confidence of someone who had just taken back her life. The sound of Nia's heels rang across the marble floor of the main lobby, steady, crisp, and proud. 2 day-shift security guards stood formally on both sides of the revolving glass door, the same 2 men who had looked at her with contempt and pushed her toward the service exit for 18 months. When Nia walked closer, the guards saw the gold-plated brass name tag on her chest, Nia Carter, Director of Independent Oversight. The faces of the 2 large men showed a flash of shock mixed with deep shame. They immediately straightened their backs, pressed their hands to their sides, and bowed respectfully as Nia passed. Nia did not stop to look at them. She did not look at them with revenge in her eyes either. She only gave a small polite nod and walked straight toward the pickup steps. The greatest slap to those who had looked down on her was not shouting or harsh punishment, but the fact that she now stood in a position far above them, looking down at their world with the grace of someone who had won through real ability. A shiny black Lincoln Town car arranged by the corporation was waiting at the curb. The uniformed driver stepped out and respectfully opened the rear door for her. Naya got into the car. The door closed softly, cutting off the noise of Manhattan's financial district behind her. The Lincoln slowly rolled across the Brooklyn Bridge, heading toward her small apartment in Queens. Through the window, Nia watched the streetlights begin to glow along both sides of the East River. New York City outside was still moving with its hurried, ruthless rhythm, but for Nia Carter, the world around her had completely changed from that afternoon onward. Naya's narration filled the quiet space inside the car, warm, deep, and reflective like the voice of an American woman who had passed through storms to reclaim the rebirth of an invisible identity. For a long time, I believed this city was built only for people standing on the 61st floor. Men like Adrian Vale always think the world runs on $5,000 suits, Ivy League degrees, and complicated algorithms designed to cut other people's lives into meaningless pieces. They look at people like me, people cleaning up their messes at 2 a.m, like invisible ghosts with no voice, no face, and no right to dream. But last night, I realized something no Wharton classroom could ever teach them. Integrity has no class, and truth does not need an expensive suit to prove its value. You can step on a cleaner's mop rag. You can push them toward the service door. But you can never put out the fire of ability and dignity inside them once they decide to stand straight and face injustice. 7 years ago, I had to close this blue leather notebook because I could not afford the overdue bills of life. I thought I would be buried forever under the dirt of high-end offices. But today I brought it back, not as a weapon for revenge, but as a reminder to myself and to every invisible person out there. We may start inside a cramped basement break room for cleaning staff, but our true place is wherever the light of justice and ability is recognized. My journey did not end with a $2 million check to live a life in hiding. It began when I walked through the front door of Blackwood Global Tower as a woman who had reshaped the rules of Wall Street with her own hands. My name is Nia Carter, and from today on, I will be the one guarding the true value of humanity inside this maze of greed. The Lincoln Town car disappeared into the golden-orange sunset of Queens, leaving behind the glittering lights of Manhattan, where a story of dignity and rebirth had officially carved its name into the heart of the city.